Whakarungo mai koe ki te reo irarangi o Aotearoa. This is Checkpoint on RNZ National. I'm Lisa Owen. Haere nei, Feel the Power. Dame Jane Campion takes out the Best Director Award at the Oscars. And Will Smith tries to take out comedian Chris Rock with a king slap, but also wins big. Auckland's Golden Mile is looking a little less glitzy after COVID takes the shine off. A divided community, how long before waka kotahi can bridge the gap in Tokomaru Bay's Pakaru Bridge? And should flood-prone houses be written off or moved to higher ground rather than repaired? A major milestone in the Christchurch Cathedral restoration, and burning up the mountain slope, skier Jess Hodder takes out the free ride world title. We're talking vertigo-inducing extreme sport here.
RNZ News at 5 o'clock. Good afternoon. Ahi Mārie ko Evie Ashton tēnei. New Zealand filmmaker Dame Jane Campion has won the Best Director Award for her gothic western The Power of the Dog at the Oscars, though it missed out on Best Film. She's just the third woman in 9 decades to win Best Director.
Kia ora, Aotearoa, New Zealand and Australia. I love directing because it's a deep dive into story, yet the task of manifesting a world can be overwhelming. The sweet thing is, I'm not alone.
Best Picture went to the heartwarming comedy drama Coda, about the only hearing member in a family of deaf adults. Jessica Chastain has won the Best Actress Oscar for her role in the drama The Eyes of Tammy Faye. However, the awards were overshadowed by a violent exchange between actor Will Smith and comedian Chris Rock. After the latter made a joke about Will Smith's wife, Jada Pinkett Smith, he marched on stage and appeared to strike Rock. Smith later apologised in his acceptance speech for collecting the Best Actor award for his performance in King Richard. The Prime Minister has congratulated Dame Jane Campion, saying New Zealanders are so proud of her.
It's just phenomenal. It speaks to her skill, her talent, but she has used that to put New Zealand on the world stage, and we just cannot underestimate the impact of that.
The Prime Minister has congratulated her and says a New Zealand delegation from the Film Commission is in Los Angeles to try to leverage off Campion's success. New Zealand is sending 9 Defence Force staff to Europe to help Ukraine defend itself against Russia's invasion. 7 intelligence analysts and 1 officer will go to the United Kingdom. 1 other officer will be based in Belgium. Cabinet has also approved the use of the Defence Force's open source intelligence capabilities for 3 months. The Prime Minister, Jacinda Ardern, says the contribution will directly help the Ukrainian army.
5 of those intelligent analysts will be specifically involved in looking at, for instance, satellite imagery, analysing information in real time that then passes through the UK and directly support of the efforts in Ukraine.
The government is also shipping communications equipment to Ukraine, along with the helmets and body armour announced last week. Contractors are working overtime to repair a washed-out bridge in the east coast town of Tokomaru Bay. The Mangahauini Bridge across State Highway 35 isn't expected to reopen until April the 13th. Jacqueline Hankin of Wakakotahi says officials have decided against building a temporary bridge because it would hinder repair work.
We have started progressing the repair on that bridge. We've had, I think in the first 24 hours, we had over 1,000 tonne of rock placed to repair that bridge. So our crews up there are doing a huge amount of work to get that bridge up and running and repaired and to be able to connect those communities again.
A small section of State Highway 35 between Tokomaru Bay and Te Puia Springs remains closed. The prominent Māori leader, Dame June Jackson, has died at the age of 82. She was an early leader of the Manukau Urban Māori Authority, which was set up in the 1980s to advocate for Māori post-urbanisation. She was also a long-running member of the Parole Board. Speaking to RNZ in 1997, Dame June said she was driven to support the thousands of Māori in South Auckland who lacked iwi links.
It's really about what is right, what is wrong, what is fair, what is unfair, and how do we resolve it. If I am a bit weak, I don't make any apologies because being a Māori means many things to many people. And sometimes if the heart is Māori, and if you care about other people.
Dame June Jackson will return to Tamaki Makaurau from Mokau tonight, where she will lie at Ngā Whare Wātea. And it could cost an extra $4.5 million to restore earthquake-damaged Christchurch Cathedral because of inflation. The project has hit a major milestone, with construction crews removing the crossing roof in their bid to stabilise the building. The rebuild has a budget of $154 million, $50 million of which must come from donations. The project's director, Keith Patterson, says consultants are working on a revised estimate as the cost of steel and wages escalates. To sport, and the veteran black cap Ross Taylor knows he's made the right decision to call time on his 15-year international cricket career. Taylor, who's now 38, announced in December that summer would be his last with the Black Caps. He'll play his final games for New Zealand in the one-day series against the Netherlands, starting in Tauranga tomorrow. Taylor played his final test against Bangladesh in January, not padding up against South Africa in February.
Watching the test match against South Africa, I didn't miss it or anything, so I think to me that was a good sign and that I'd made the right decision. I'm happy with the decision that I made, and it's the end, so just go out there and enjoy it.
The All Whites are 2 wins away from qualifying for the Football World Cup after beating Tahiti 1-0 to reach the final of the Oceania World Cup qualifying tournament in Qatar. It was far from a comprehensive win, with New Zealand failing to convert any of their numerous opportunities until Liberato Kakache pounced onto a loose ball in the Tahiti goal box midway through the second half. Despite the solitary goal, coach Danny Hay maintains he never doubted the result.
We could have been more clinical. We had a number of opportunities, particularly at the back end of the first half, and again, a number in the second half. We put ourselves under pressure by not being clinical.
New Zealand will play Solomon Islands in Thursday morning's final. The winner of the tournament then meets the fourth best team from the CONCACAF Federation for a place at the World Cup finals at the end of the year. That's the news.
Joe Biden's in hot water with Russia.
This allows Vladimir Putin to say the Americans were trying to cancel Russia. Here's clear stone-cold evidence.
China's relationship with Solomon Islands raises the alarm.
We see such acts as the potential militarisation of the region. We do see this as gravely concerning.
And Dame Jane Campion has stars in her eyes.
Everybody likes an underdog, especially here in Hollywood. For so long, Jane Campion's The Power of the Dog has been the front runner.
The Power of the News. Morning report weekdays from 6 on RNZ National.
You're with Lisa Owen on Checkpoint next. First, the short forecast from Met Service to midnight Tuesday. Northland to northern Taranaki, Taumarunui and Bay of Plenty, mainly fine. Isolated showers in the Bay of Plenty and Coromandel during the afternoons and evenings, and possibly in Northland and Auckland tomorrow. From southern Taranaki to Wellington, fine and cloudy periods. A few showers are possible in Wellington. Gisborne and Hawke's Bay, rain with isolated heavy falls in Gisborne and the Wairoa district until tomorrow. Taihape and Wairarapa, cloudy periods with a few showers. Fine weather for Nelson. From Bulla to Fiordland, cloudy periods. A few showers are developing about the fjords by evening and possibly further north tomorrow morning. From Marlborough to Southland, fine apart from some cloudy areas near the coast. Cloud is becoming widespread tonight with patchy drizzle developing, mainly about coastal Marlborough, Otago and Southland. And for Rekohu, the Chatham Islands, low cloud with drizzle at times. It's 7 minutes past 5. We'll have news headlines for you at 5:30.
And the Oscar goes to Jane Campion. Power of the Dog.
Tēnā koutou katoa, no mai haere mai ki Checkpoint e tēnei rā, ko Lisa Owen tēnei. She made history as the first woman to be nominated twice for Best Director at the Academy Awards, and tonight New Zealand director Dame Jane Campion brought it home. Her much-lauded dark western, The Power of the Dog, was set in Montana but filmed in central Otago. It went into tonight's ceremony as favourite with 12 nominations, having already won 3 Golden Globes for Best Motion Picture, Best Supporting Actor and Best Director. But luck wasn't on the film side tonight with Dame Jane Campion, the film's only winner. Sci-fi film June took out 6 awards and Apple's Coda won 3 out of 3, including Best Picture. 67-year-old Dame Jane, who now lives in Sydney, paid tribute to her fellow nominees, including Steven Spielberg, whose nomination for West Side Story made him the first director nominated over 6 decades. Her win comes 28 years after Dame Jane won Best Original Screenplay for the piano in 1994. That year, she lost Best Director to Steven Spielberg for Schindler's List.
Kia ora, Aotearoa, New Zealand and Australia. I love directing because it's a deep dive into story, yet the task of manifesting a world can be overwhelming. The sweet thing is, I'm not alone. On The Power of the Dog, I worked with actors I'm moved to call my friends. They met the challenge of this story with the depth of their gifts. Benedict Cumberbatch, Kirsten Dunst, Cody Smith-McPhee, Jesse Plemons. And my whole crew who are true hearts. I thank my brilliant producers, Tanya Sagatchian, who was always by my side, Emile Sherman, Ian Canning, and Roger Frappier, also Kate Richter. Netflix, your whole awesome team embraced this film from the very beginning. Thank you so very much. And my home people, my family, you know who you are, especially Alice, my daughter, who's here. And Tony, my beautiful partner. You gave me so much love and encouragement and made it fun. But it would be impossible without the man I never met, Thomas Savage. He wrote about cruelty, wanting the opposite, kindness. Thank you, Academy. It's a lifetime honour. Thank you. Thank you.
And David Strong is the CEO of the New Zealand Film Commission. He's been rubbing shoulders with film stars and studio execs in Hollywood today and joins us now from LA's Dolby Theatre. David, have you got any fingernails left after that?
Good afternoon. How are you?
I'm great.
It was a nerve-wracking event.
Yeah, tell me about it.
Well, it's great to be here. You know, I'm still in the Dolby Theatre now. I think everyone's pretty much packing up. But to witness the art and craft of the best filmmakers in the world today and celebrate that with them was truly a fantastic opportunity. And I think we should all be proud of, Dame Jane's achievement with the Best Director Award tonight. It's a remarkable achievement.
Have you had a chance to talk to her?
I talked to her on Thursday night, but she's been pretty busy tonight. So hopefully later on after this I'll be able to catch up with her and raise a toast and celebrate.
So how much is an Oscar worth to the New Zealand film industry?
Well, I think we should look at it in terms of an Oscar, Golden Globes, the BAFTAs, the Critics' Choice Award, and the 225 other awards that The Power of the Dog has received over the last 4 or 5 months. It's certainly shone a spotlight on New Zealand, and it once again brings to the fore around the world just the talent and the depth of skill, the locations that we have in New Zealand.
Yeah, what did New Zealand taxpayers kick in for this movie? Was it around $8 million?
Yeah, so the government put in $8 million into this film, plus the Netflix investment led to around about $28 million being put directly into our economy. And about 60% of that money went directly to service industries, accommodation, rentals, building, construction, electrics, etc. And we understand that because the film was made over the first COVID period, it actually saved a number of service industries. So I think it's a big win for the country.
So you're over there in Hollywood at the moment. What are you selling them? Because don't they already know about us?
Well, they do. But at the same time, most of the studios here have multiple locations to make their films. Australia, Canada, the UK. And we certainly need to put our best foot forward to bring the business back home.
David, do you think there's a perception that we're still closed for COVID?
I don't think so. Certainly the conversations we've been having, and we've had, some already with Warner's, HBO Max, they're well aware that we're open. Some of them are very keen to come down and scout and to secure some studio space. So I think that perception has gone, but we need to have those relationships and meet with them one-on-one and talk it through with them.
The Screen Production Grant, right, which gives a 20% rebate on qualifying spend here for overseas productions, it's under review at the moment. Are we attractive enough without that, or should we actually be giving them more?
Well, if we look at an Australian case study a few years ago, they had a rebate and they dropped it, and they had a 97% drop in international production very shortly afterwards. So while New Zealand is in the ballpark, and we're nowhere near the top, some nations have 37% rebates, 20% puts us in the ballpark. But then we have the other things, we have that Kiwi factor, we do have great crews, great locations.
Yeah, so in terms of international productions, can you give us a bit of an idea about how many are booked to come here this year?
Oh, well, I have to keep that information commercially sensitive at the moment.
Give us
but I
a
can say
ballpark,
there's somewhere
David.
between four and six around about between TV series and films, of which a few that we're working with are particularly large tentpole productions that would once again put New Zealand as a tourism destination as well.
Hey, David,
if we can secure those, I think it'll be very good for the country.
Apart from Dame Jane's win, it was pretty action-packed. I mean, how close to the stage were you? Did you see what went on with Will Smith and Chris Rock?
Yeah, I saw what happened between Will Smith and Chris Rock, and I shouldn't be the one to comment about that. I think Will, in his speech afterwards, tried to make amends there.
Can you tell us what was the atmosphere like in the theatre?
It was certainly a surprise. Well, I think it was great. I mean, I think that took us all by surprise, and it probably took the audience, the viewing public around the world by surprise. But apart from that, it was a very festive atmosphere, very celebratory, as I guess you'd expect for the Academy Awards.
So a high note, because Jane Campion is a champion. So what are you going to do to celebrate tonight? Got any plans?
Well, I do hope to be able to catch up with her and raise a glass, but then I've got a whole lot more interviews in the morning, so it won't be a late night for me tonight.
For sure. Thank you so much for joining us. That is David Strong, who is the CEO of the New Zealand Film Commission, and he is right there in Hollywood. Now, the Oscars will be long remembered for actor Will Smith smacking comedian Chris Rock on stage.
I'm out here. Uh-oh, Richard. Oh, wow. Wow. Will Smith just smacked out of me.
Chris Rock made a joke about Will Smith's wife, Jada Pinkett Smith, saying he can't wait to see her in G.I. Jane 2. Jada Pinkett Smith has been open about her struggle with alopecia, an autoimmune disorder that leads to hair loss. She has a shaved head. Will Smith walked onto stage and slapped Chris Rock with an open hand. Chris Rock was left stunned. Smith returned to his seat before swearing at the comedian.
Wow, dude.
Yeah.
It was a G.I. Jane joke.
Keep my wife's name out your mouth.
I'm going to, okay? Okay. That was a greatest night in the history of television. Okay.
Will Smith later won Best Actor for his role as Venus and Serena Williams' father, Richard, in the film King Richard. It is almost 17 minutes past 5. Kia mau tonu mai. Stay with us. You're listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National. The Defence Minister says the draft security arrangement between China and Solomon Islands took him by surprise. Pene Henare says it would be extremely concerning if any other Pacific nations were eyeing a similar deal. The agreement would potentially allow Beijing to station military forces there, prompting alarm here and across the Tasman. The Minister has just returned from a trip to Fiji, where New Zealand made a commitment to strengthen defence ties, saying it's important for this country to have a strong presence in the region. Here's our political editor, Jane Patterson.
The draft document, leaked last week, lays down a framework which could allow Beijing to deploy forces to, quote, protect the safety of Chinese personnel and major projects in Solomon Islands. It says the Solomons may ask China to send police and military personnel to the country. Defence Minister Pene Henare says it wasn't on his intelligence radar.
We know China and their influence in the Solomon Islands as far as their willingness to continue to support their community, their embassy, as well as some of the security challenges that have been faced in the Solomon Islands. But to see the wording in the draft agreement could certainly come to me as a surprise.
Jacinda Ardern says she spoke directly with the Prime Minister of the Solomons late last year and describes this latest development as gravely concerning.
We see such acts as the potential militarisation of the region
and also see very little reason in terms of the Pacific security for such a need and such a presence.
A sentiment shared by Australia's Defence Minister Peter Dutton.
We want to be able to resolve any issues within that family, within our region, and we would be concerned clearly about any military base being established, and we would express that to the Solomon Islands government.
Nanaia Mahuta is travelling to Fiji today, her first visit to the region as Foreign Minister. Former Foreign Minister and New Zealand First Leader Winston Peters is accusing the government of neglecting the region and taking its foot off the pedal since the 2018 Pacific reset. But he too is looking warily at the draft agreement.
I think we need to be seriously concerned because the real issue is what is its purpose and why is it needed? There is no military threat in the Pacific. There's no military threat in the Blue Continent, of which we are a critical part.
But Ms Ardern's pushing back on his criticisms, saying the relationship between Solomon Islands and China was starting to grow closer during Mr Peters' time as minister. And she says COVID has disrupted the usual level of contact.
We have, of course, respected the fact that our neighbours have closed their borders during COVID, and now that we have the opportunity to travel into the Pacific safely and be welcomed, we are doing so.
Transparency Solomon Islands says this draft agreement just adds to the long list of controversial policy decisions the government's made in recent years. Its chief executive in Honiara, Ruth Lilo-Goulart, says it's easy to blame Australia and New Zealand, but this reflects more fundamental problems.
It's a leadership crisis inside our country, and those they're surrounding themselves with, to look at the bigger picture. And people also are fighting to stay in employment. There is lack of employment.
Jacinda Ardern says the agreement and New Zealand's concern about the militarisation of the Pacific will be raised with China through diplomatic channels.
Auckland City's Golden Mile has yet to stage its own recovery from lockdowns and the exodus of thousands of inner city workers. 2 years into the pandemic, dozens of shops remain empty on the main street, and foot traffic in the CBD is still less than half what it was in 2019. Reporter Amy Williams and camera operator Marika Habazi took the mood of the city.
Shuttered shops are the new normal on Queen Street. From the Town Hall to Customs Street, there are at least 34 empty shops with for lease signs hanging in their windows. This retailer, who wishes to remain anonymous, owns a shoe store on the brink.
It has taken a toll on me because, to be here every day, not get enough sales. Now we're in the point where customers don't even come in because there's hardly anyone in the city and people don't have money to spend.
The store made just 2 sales last week.
My lease comes to an end in a month, so I would be closing doors and going. There's no other positive factors that could keep me back because financially I'm drained, and even though borders are opened, I don't think we can actually play the waiting game. It could be months, but it could be years before the city turns around again.
The store is in Queen's Arcade, where more than half of the retailers have closed down or relocated. The specialty music store Marbeck's is among those remaining. Owner Roger Marbeck says seeing neighbours in the arcade leave is devastating.
It's kind of like a big family in here, so it's tragic. These are people's lives. 60% of them gone. So they've shut up shop or they've moved somewhere else. A few have gone elsewhere. Others have just given up. They just didn't have the horsepower to see it through. We're lucky because we've got an online presence, and that's just got us through.
At risk of sounding like a broken record, he says the city needs office workers to return to get its hum back, along with international tourists.
It should be pumping, there should be a good flow, but no, it's very quiet. So that is a major problem.
The ongoing Omicron outbreak has put a dampener on outings. Heart of the City pedestrian counts show foot traffic in the city centre was down 65% last week compared to the same time in 2019, adding up to about 1 million fewer visits. Those out and about today say it's still noticeably quiet.
It's a lot quieter, than usual. Yeah, and I found that before I've come in the evening for dinner, and there was hardly anybody in the restaurants, and so it's a lot quieter. Obviously, people are avoiding Omicron, or maybe don't have so much money after COVID. I came maybe 2 weeks ago in the evening on a Friday night, I think it was, and there was nobody around.
What's it like? What's the mood of the city?
Dead. Yeah, we were just talking about it. Actually, no one's here. Yeah, it's almost like a Sunday morning, I guess. We actually didn't have a plan. Yeah, we ended up just buying one jacket. Yeah, walked to town for one jacket.
There'll be international visitors arriving at some point. How are they going to find it? What are they going to make of the city, do you think?
I'm not sure. I'm not them, but I don't know.
Opposite the Civic Theatre, Remedy Coffee has survived the city's lockdowns, and last week 3 days mopping up floodwater from the deluge. When we visit, owner Richard O'Hanlon is busy serving customers, but he says it's not business as usual.
Slowly picking up. You have good days and bad, and then as per Auckland, last week we got flooded, so we had to shut for 3 days. But we're back open again, but the streets are quiet. People still working from home.
He says the central city is looking better now some roadworks are finished. And he's hoping Australians stop in for their coffee fix when the border reopens to our neighbours across the Tasman on April 13th.
We normally do quite well with the Australians. I think just because of the layout of the shop, the fact that we are in the CBD. And you can always tell because they always pay $50 for a $4 coffee, So, I can't wait for them to come back, actually.
There is some hope for businesses toughing it out. Roger Marbeck says his music store had surprisingly good sales at the weekend.
It's been really, really tough. Probably the toughest we've ever known it, in fact. But there are signs of it recovering. In the last week, we've just seen, little signs.
Heart of the City says foot traffic has been creeping up over recent days in the city centre.
And if you were listening to that piece from Marika and Amy on radio, we'll put the video up on our webpage. Homai o whakaaro, we'd love your feedback. Nō reira anei na kaupapa mo te hōtaka nei. Do we need targeted support to get people back into the city? Do we want them back? Some of you may have noticed fewer cars and commuters. Do we want to go back to the same volume of people in the downtown area? Let me know your thoughts. Text me, Pātui Mai 2101, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, or you can email checkpoints@rnz.co.nz. Actual horsepower, a bucket on a pulley or good old-fashioned wading through the mud are just a few of the workarounds being used by people in a tiny east coast town split in two after a bridge collapsed during flooding. The washout on State Highway 35 bisected Tokomaru Bay and has left a 2-metre-plus gaping hole in the Mangahoini Bridge. That means some kids are separated from school and whānau from much-needed supplies. So how far away is a fix? Jacqueline Hankin from Waka Kotahi joins us now. Kia ora, Jacqueline. Talk us through how bad the damage is on the bridge.
Kia ora. So I guess the damage is pretty significant on the bridge. However, I can tell you that our crews have been working dawn till dusk and double shifting crews since we had the design in place to repair the bridge and get that community connected again.
Yeah, tell us a little bit about the repairs. So people who are watching, there is a picture we're showing and there's a bunch of rocks that are being moved to near the bridge. What's going on there?
So those rocks are there to try and get the water away from the bridge. So to do that repair, we can't have the water under the bridge there. So what those rocks are doing is diverting the river away from where we need to repair the structure.
So you're damming it up, basically, short term?
Yeah, well, we're not damming it because we're not stopping the flow of the river. We're just diverting it. It's carrying on its course. It's just moving away from the bottom of the structure there.
Why isn't it possible to chuck up a temporary bridge, a Bailey bridge, as some people know it?
So that is a possibility, and the team, that was one of the first options we looked at. However, it's not just chucking up a Bailey Bridge and putting it up, and there is a lot of complexities to that. So we did look into that. One of the biggest issues with the Bailey Bridge is that it sits on the existing structure there. So as you can imagine, you've seen those pictures with the machinery and the people working there. So the Bailey Bridge would be right in the path of those people working. There's also some technical reasons why, and it is to do with the angle that the current bridge is on. So because of that, it would actually mean that that Bailey Bridge would only be used for light vehicles. So we couldn't put heavy vehicles or pedestrians across it.
Have you definitely ruled that out as an option or not?
Yes, we would, because the time for us to put the Bailey up and get it rectified would actually be very similar to the time to repair the bridge.
Okay. So are you putting extra resources or staff into it, and how long do you think this job is going to take?
So as I said, the crews are working dawn till dusk. So they are double shifting it. They're working 7 days a week. We are putting everything we can possibly into this. And I think we need to emphasise that the crews are working their heart out to get this community connected. At this stage, we're saying the 13th of April. However, the crews are going to try and make sure that it is open as soon as possible, but make sure that it is safe to be open as well.
So you're basically hoping to get it open for that Easter weekend. Do you imagine that that would be open to all kinds of vehicles or just light vehicles? Or will it be fully fixed? Is that the goal at that point?
So it won't be fully fixed, but it will be open to all vehicles. So fully fixed means kind of back to its original state. The bridge will still be unsealed. It will be, I guess, in layman's terms, gravel, because we need to let it stabilise and set before we can put the seal over it. But it will be open. There's a number of areas on the network that I think we need to be very clear that the network will be open, the roading network will be open. However, there will be temporary speed limits. There'll be a lot of traffic cones, signage, one lanes in places, and also places where it will be kind of traffic lights, one lane, giveaways. So it's not going to be back to kind of the state highway as we know it.
In terms of that particular bridge, does it have any quirks or particular challenges that mean that it's going to take longer?
No. So we've got a very robust design. We know what we're in for. The crews are well aware of what needs to be done. This is what they're great at, and they're in there getting it done for that community.
Appreciate your time, Jacqueline. That's Jacqueline Hankin from Waka Kotahi there, talking about the bridge that is splitting Tokomaru Bay because it's got a big gaping hole in it post-flooding. Let's get to some of your feedback now. You've got in touch about Auckland's CBD. This person says, so sorry and sad to hear about businesses and the issues they face. However, I can't see for some time, if ever, it will go back to what it was like. So many large corporations are finding it great having staff working from home. It saves their power bills, their internet charges, their water rates, but also they could look for smaller premises, reducing their costs. So somehow we need to help those businesses, but how especially when people have no reason to go into the CBD? That's from Thomas. Another listener says, working from home is here to stay. Cafes need to adapt to this new normal or close. And this one too, we need to let people return to their offices in their own time. It's a matter of feeling safe. Do keep it coming. 2101 on the text. Kia ora, e te iwi e Hariaki nei i a checkpoint. We talked to the Kiwi extreme ski champ who was on top of the mountain, and the Christchurch Cathedral restoration hits a big milestone. Homai o whakaaro. We would love your feedback on anything you've heard on the program this evening. Text us 2101, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, or there's email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. Time now for the headlines. Ko Eve anō tēnei.
New Zealand filmmaker Dame Jane Campion has missed out on Best Film at the Oscars, but isn't going home empty-handed. She's taken the trophy for Best Director for her gothic western, The Power of the Dog. Best Picture went to the comedy drama Coda, about a family of deaf adults. But the ceremony took a violent turn when actor Will Smith slapped comedian Chris Rock across the face when he made a joke about Smith's wife, Jada Pinkett Smith. Smith later apologised as he collected the award for Best Actor for his performance in King Richard. 9 Defence Force personnel are being sent to work in Britain and Belgium to help with intelligence work following Russia's invasion of Ukraine. The Prime Minister, Jacinda Ardern, says 5 of the group will be specifically involved in analysing satellite imagery. New Zealand will also send communications equipment to Ukraine, provided by Christchurch-based company Tate Communications. It will take more than 2 weeks to repair a flood-damaged bridge in the east coast town of Tokomaru Bay. Contractors are working flat out to fix the Mangahauwini Bridge across State Highway 35. A small section of the highway between Tokomaru Bay and Te Puia Springs remains closed. An Auckland councillor says an incident where a woman is accused of brandishing a gun at a group of students doesn't reflect the reality of living in South Auckland. The gun turned out to be an imitation, and a 20-year-old woman is due to appear in court. Ward councillor Alf Filipaina says the fight wasn't on school grounds and the person with the weapon wasn't a student. He says people often rush to make judgments about crime in the city's south. And tributes are being paid to a pioneer and activist who dedicated her life to Māori, especially in urban centres. Dame June Jackson was 82. Those are the headlines. Our next news and weather is at 6.
Kia ora rā e ho no mai hoki mai. This is Checkpoint, ko Lisa Owen tēnei. It is time for the business news, ko taku hoa inai nei, ko Nona Peltier. Nona, the Financial Markets Authority has ordered a property investment fund to stop marketing its latest offer. What's all that about?
Yeah, so it's an interim stop order. This is something that the Financial Markets Authority can issue when they're concerned that the offer that's being advertised or disclosed is likely to be false or misleading, or even to confuse consumers or investors. And so what this deal is something that's offering quite a large return on investment. I think it's something like 50%, which over 3 years, which the FMA, I think, perhaps thinks might be just too good to be true. So they've put this order in place and they're going to review it. It's in respect of statements made by the One Management organization, and they're promoting a fund called One in Longhorn Partnership Fund. Another party that's been involved in this particular interim stop order is James Law Realty, which has also been involved in the promotion of this particular fund. So for now, this is on hold. The Financial Markets Authority is going to review it. That usually takes about 15 days, and then they'll decide whether or not to lift that interim order or to put a stop to it completely.
And Nona, one of the New Zealand share market's former heavyweights, could be making a comeback. What's the company we're talking about there? We're
talking Carter Holt Harvey.
Right.
So a number of people might remember that company. It's a building supplies group, and it's looking at a public share float. This is not the first time we've heard this from the owner of Carter Holt Harvey, which is Rank Group. That's a firm that's owned by New Zealand billionaire Graham Hart. He took that company private when he took it over in early 2006. And so there has been talk for some time about it coming back to the market. This time it wouldn't come back as Carter Holt Harvey, though. There's a tentative name. It's called Building Supplies Group. Whether or not it happens, we've heard this before, so might happen, it might not happen. If it does, the value of this particular group has been set at something like $1 billion, and some $500 million would be targeted through an initial public offer if it goes ahead. So for now, it's just a report out of the Australian Financial Review.
Okay, speaking of markets, Nona, let's take a trot around the markets.
Yeah, it's been an interesting day on the markets. Asian markets are weaker, and that's partly because of the coronavirus lockdown in Shanghai. it's looked to set to hit global activity. We're seeing that already coming through the market here. The local top 50 index, it closed down more than 1.2%. That was a drop of 145 points to 11,910. The dollar is also slightly weaker against the US at 69.5 US cents, 92.4 Australian, but it's steady against the British pence at 52.8.
Thanks, Nona. Ka kite, Nona Peltier there with Business News. Some East Coast residents are mopping up and shovelling out their mud and water-soaked homes for the second time in a year, raising serious questions about whether flood-prone properties are worth saving. The government's working on a Climate Adaptation Act that will address the legal issues around managed retreat and funding and financing adaptation. But that work won't be finished until next year, and experts say it is a serious problem now. Coordinating lead author with the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, Judy Lawrence, joins me now. Kia ora, Judy. How urgent is this work?
Kia ora, Lisa. Very, in a word. The IPCC have repeatedly identified the need to get going yesterday and to organise and get this done urgently.
Are we moving with enough speed then?
The issue is that we need to reflect a little about the frequency of these events. We've had East Cape Bowler many years ago. We've had Tasman about 5 or 6 years ago. We've had the East Cape several times. We've had the Hutt Valley weather bomb. We've had Coromandel. We've had West Coast. We've had Auckland. And they repeat and they repeat and they repeat. So there's a pattern here, and we now have the means to identify that in all likelihood, these are affected by the changing climate. We know that it is going to get worse. We're going to have extreme heavy rainfall, unpredictably across a lot of New Zealand, but concentrated in the areas that I've identified. But we can't rule out surprises as well. So what we're talking about is the need to develop something like the Marshall Plan for New Zealand. And I don't exaggerate, because what it needs is massive coordination. It needs logistical support. It needs not this pick up, recover. But what we're seeing is that recovery is not finished before the next one comes along.
Yeah,
so there's something happening out there that...
Well, part of the something, Judy, is that we're not learning a lesson, aren't we?
Absolutely.
Because we are watching these pictures on the television of people, painstakingly repairing houses. Yep. Is it time to accept that there is no point doing that, to either write the houses off, raise them on stilts, build somewhere else, and who's going to make that call?
I think what we're seeing is what the Australians recently coined, which is landscape collapse. So this is more than about where houses go, and it's more than about bailing people out. And I would say that I have huge empathy for what is happening in the East Coast right now. It's shocking, and it's ruining people's lives. And we need to be thinking about all the instruments that we can use. Yes, managed retreat will be one of them. But I think we need to look beyond that. I think we need to look about how we manage our land, the activities we have on it, what we've done to it historically, and where we might heal it going forward. And I think those reflections are needed, as well as, well, we can pay people out and they can get on with their lives, because of course they don't. Their long-term effects of disruption are enormous. And we've seen this with the Queensland floods and the fires in Australia, where the mental health issues have become extreme from those impacts. And so we can learn from over there as well. But I think the basis of the whole thing is that we can't just do piecemeal stuff. We have to do it in a coordinated manner. And the Adaptation Act, which has been mooted, is a way in which we could develop the logistics, the coordination, the requirement on every level of government, every industry and sector to think about climate change before they make decisions.
Judy,
and that's not been happening. And so we do need to have a whole lot of instruments in our toolkit but we need to have a framework around it that's adequately coordinated.
So regardless of the framework and the instruments, somebody is going to have to stump up some money. And who's going to pay for this then? Because it's going to get to the point where people simply cannot insure their houses, right? And it is the biggest asset that they own. So who's going to pay them to move on? I understand all the psychological issues, etc. But in terms of the mechanics, who's going to pay?
Well, I think the whole community has to pay at the end of the day, because it's going to affect all of us at some point. So that means the government, and that means local people, it means communities, and it means, importantly, finding new funding ways or funding instruments.
So
and
is that a levy, Judy?
That's about the private sector stumping up money as well. So I think it's a combination of all of us contributing to this.
So does it come through a levy or rates or tax?
Tax at the end of the day.
Why is it that if you look at house prices, you look at homes close to the sea and land close to the sea continues to command absolute premium prices? Again, not changing our behaviours, are we?
No, we're not. And there's a lot of evidence to say that, you can have an inundation effect, a flooding event, and it goes, the values are very inelastic, basically. They don't move as a result of those sorts of things. Now, that means that you've got to put some sort of regulatory arrangement in place so that the market does actually hear that message. At the moment, it's not. And that means regulation, and that means government money, and it means money from all of our taxes and all of our communities contributing to this. This is a long-term thing. It's not going to go away. It's going to get worse. And that was why I'm suggesting that this is something that everybody needs to be able to pay for, because it's going to affect all of us. And we need to find ways of doing that at the least cost. And, of course, kicking the can down the road is not going to do that. We have to confront these issues now. Putting rock, throwing rock in the edge of the sea is only going to last so long. And it may be in some cases that we shouldn't be throwing rocks in the rivers and the seas, that we should actually be buying out people in these situations. And there's precedent for that, of course, in New Zealand.
Really appreciate your time, Judy. Thank you so much for joining us. That is Judy Lawrence there. Interested in your views on this one, do get in touch. Text us on 2101, tweet us at checkpointrnz. Should we be paying out people who are living in, in situations that are precarious with climate change? People in Tokomaru Bay cleaning out their houses for the second time in a year and doing repairs. And some of those coastal towns which continued to get hammered. Is it time to move people out of there, and who should pay? Now, the petition to save one of Christchurch's birthing units has been boosted with support from Gemma and Richie McCaw. The closure of St George's Maternity Centre would leave Christchurch Women's Hospital as the only primary birthing unit in the city. The McCaws have promoted the petition on their social media channels, and organisers say they've helped bump it to 20,000 signatures. Samantha G has more.
Former Blackstick and mum of two Gemma McCaw had postnatal care after the birth of both her daughters, Charlotte and Grace, at St George's. She learnt about its potential closure and the petition to save it through her midwife.
I arrived in the middle of the night with Grace to a warm, friendly smile and a midwife, with something to eat and a drink, and you kind of get settled in. Birth is a big process, but getting that immediate care afterwards was just amazing for me. Like I say, the warmth, and also just knowing that you're supported.
Gemma McCaw says she was extremely grateful for the care she received at St George's, and that things would have been different for her if she hadn't received that support.
You're suddenly a new parent, and it's knowing where to start. And again, we were really lucky, had an amazing obstetrician and midwife. And then after that, going there and, you're learning to feed and all those little things that if you're straight home and not well supported, it could be quite a really hard experience, especially if you've had a baby already and have to go back to care for other children.
Both Gemma and her husband Richie signed the petition and shared it with their followers on social media.
I feel really sad to know that, if this potentially is another birthing unit to close, what is the future looking like in this space? And there's amazing people working hard, our midwives and everybody in this area, but we've just got to do a bit more to help all the others to come in the future.
Rata Midwives, who started the petition, says they've had phone calls, emails and the number of signatures has increased steadily since Gemma McCaw became involved. New Zealand College of Midwives Chief Executive Alison Eddy says if St George's closes, there will be no other primary birthing facility in Christchurch City.
So that's a huge loss for the wider Christchurch community. Options for women are severely reduced now, and Christchurch Women's will be the only non-home setting that's available for women, and that's already overwhelmed and is not the best place for women that have got low risk of complications and having well pregnancies. Primary units are an ideal setting.
Alison Eddy says midwives are concerned Christchurch women will no longer have options for maternity care, creating more pressure at what is already a stressful time. She says news of the review and potential closure of the centre came as a shock to many.
I think they've had trouble with staffing. I believe that's been an ongoing issue, as many maternity facilities are experiencing, but it has come as quite a surprise, I think, to the community and to the workforce. I don't know what the imperative or driver is. We are aware that the DHB is planning to build a new primary maternity facility close to the central city, but that hasn't even started yet.
St George's Hospital Chief Executive Blair Roxburgh was not available for an interview, but says feedback is being sought from maternity staff after presenting them with a proposal about the future of the centre. The hospital has a contract with the Canterbury District Health Board to provide publicly funded maternity services. Staff have until April 14 to give feedback on the proposal, with a decision on the maternity centre's future expected a couple of weeks later.
The government is sending 9 Defence Force intelligence personnel to the UK and Belgium to support Ukraine's efforts against the Russian invasion. 7 intelligence analysts will head to the UK for the next 3 months to help ease heightened demand for intelligence assessments. A further 2 officers will head to the UK and Belgium, one to join the existing defence attaché and New Zealand military representative to NATO, and the other to the UK's permanent joint headquarters. The Prime Minister, Jacinda Ardern, says the support will help Ukraine defend its homeland.
5 of those intelligent analysts will be specifically involved in looking at, for instance, satellite imagery, analysing information in real time that then passes through the UK and directly support of the efforts in Ukraine for the army in Ukraine.
Te Piramia says New Zealand troops won't be sent to the battlefield but could not rule out intelligence work being used for lethal actions.
Here we are a third party. We're working alongside our defence partners in the UK to provide that capability. Obviously, this is about making sure that there is support for Ukraine to undertake its own operation to defend themselves and their homeland against the invasion by Russia. That includes real-time information, and that's what our people will be supporting them with.
The shipment of non-lethal military equipment confirmed last week is heading to Australia tomorrow and onwards to Ukraine later this week. Cabinet has also approved the use of open source intelligence capabilities for the next 3 months to help the war effort. The war in Ukraine is now thought to have displaced at least half of the country's children. About 4.3 million kids have fled their homes so far. Ukrainian authorities and refugee host countries say their best hope of supporting the children is to get them back into the school system where they can receive support and protection from trafficking and exploitation. The ABC's Barbara Miller has more.
I'm really good. Pretty good, okay. I'm very happy to hear this.
A Zoom lesson with a twist. Learning from home are the kids who, until the war began, attended this school. In the classroom, a girl who fled to Lviv with her family when the invasion began.
My name is Karina. I'm 9 years old. I'm from Zaporizhia and I'm in year 3.
Karina and kids like her don't just take lessons at the Vyacheslav Chornovil school. They eat in the canteen and sleep in the classrooms where bunk beds have taken the place of the kids' desks.
My eyes are full of tears because it's very unusual.
Miroslava Melimuk has been teaching English at the school for 28 years. All this takes some getting used to.
My pupils, I know every place, every desk where they sit, where they communicate with each other. And it's very unusual to see these people, they are nervous, they are shocked, they are afraid of war.
The school gym has become a place for donated clothes to be stored and camouflage nets to be woven. So the PE class has been moved to a hallway. There's only one student here in person anyway, 9-year-old Andriy from Kyiv. The teacher monitors on a huge screen whether the other kids are doing their push-ups and planks. Half of Ukraine's kids are thought to have been displaced by the war. They'll need support for years to come. James Elder is a UNICEF spokesman.
It's not just about the curriculum getting it online, it's about what sort of education do kids need who are traumatised, who have been separated from their dad, who are now living in an entirely different city.
My dear students!
The teachers at the Vyacheslav Chornovil school are working 7 days a week now. Lots of people ask me if it's hard for me to be doing this, but it's not, says Maria Bohacz, the principal, because we have such a good team and we all pitch in. That's why I'm proud of it. The principal says she doesn't know how long she and her team will have to keep working like this, but she says they're ready to do it for as long as it takes.
Some of you getting in touch already about the interview we did on climate adaptation. Who pays for people to move from flood-prone areas or by the sea? The suggestion was the taxpayer does. And boy, that's got you going. This person says absolutely no way should taxpayers cough up for people who have known about climate change for over a decade. We all make decisions and many people have chosen not to buy in areas prone to inundation. Grant, though, says I'm happy to contribute to moving communities that face inundation, but we need to put people on notice that if they're still building on new vulnerable sites now, that many are, they will be on their own. And this one from another listener. So as a non-homeowner, I need to pay for other people to live by the sea or river, etc. Expletive removed. Do keep your feedback coming. Text us on 2101 or tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ. Labour unions in the US are on the verge of a famous victory at the expense of the e-commerce and cloud computing giant Amazon. For years, Amazon has tried to block unionisation and recently raised its average starting pay to around 26 New Zealand dollars an hour, but workers at 3 different warehousing sites are now holding an historic vote. The BBC's Michelle Fleury has more.
Chris Smalls is trying to organise a union at his former warehouse. His campaign started when he was fired from Amazon 2 years ago after a walkout over COVID-19 working conditions.
To sign up over 4,000 workers in less than a year is historical by itself.
The difficulty he faces: Amazon doesn't like unions and has successfully kept them out since its founding in 1994. Staten Island workers think they've got the online retailer rattled.
We built this. Okay? You know it, I know it, Amazon definitely knows it. That's why they fight us so hard. That's why for almost a year they've threatened us, harassed us.
This is Mitch with the Amazon Labor Union. How are you doing?
To talk to people about the upcoming election.
I need as much help as I can get.
Volunteers make a final push by phone to convince the undecided ahead of the vote. Chris Smalls says there should be nothing scary about a union at Amazon.
New York is a union town. We're surrounded by unions. The Amazon workers are surrounded by unions. You know, one out of every 5 people are unionized.
But they are Amazon and are fighting the union drive. In a statement, the online retailer told the BBC, "As a company, we don't think unions are the best answer for our employees. Our focus remains on working directly with our team to continue making Amazon a great place to work." As well as Amazon's resistance, there are plenty of workers who aren't sure they need a union, like Robert Adujar.
We've gotten a lot of benefits from Amazon that it's a little hard to see a union become necessary.
So a victory at this massive warehouse is far from assured. Nevertheless, Amazon has been relentless, trying to crush efforts to hold elections.
Restoration work on the Christchurch Cathedral has hit a big milestone, with construction crews removing the crossing roof in their bid to stabilise the building. They hope the church is safe enough for workers to go inside by Christmas, for the first time since it was badly damaged in the 2011 earthquake. Reporter Jean Edwards and cameraman Nate McKinnon took a look.
The heart of Christchurch City is about to have open heart surgery. Construction workers are taking a top-down approach to stabilising the cathedral by going in through the crossing roof. The project's director, Keith Patterson, says that means the stone gable arches can be removed, leaving the cathedral divided into 4 independently supported sections.
This piece of open heart surgery will do the final decoupling so that the structures that we've put around the perimeter have enough design strength to hold the components separately.
A remote-controlled digger is also being sent in to clear some of the rubble, saving stained glass and carved stone, and an unholy amount of pigeon poo that's piled up over the last decade. Just how much is anyone's guess.
It's very hard to estimate because it's dry. We have got a bit of a sweepstake going, somewhere between 1 and 2 tonnes, we think.
Naylor Love engineer Cameron Ballas says they initially planned to go in through the side of the cathedral, but it's easier and safer working from above.
Inherently, those arches are quite a risk and they have a lot of unstable stone, and actually going at it from above in some ways is a little bit easier. If you don't have to climb up scaffold and have falling risk above you, we can rely more on cranes to do the heavy lifting, and we can make sure that there's nothing above the workers that can fall and hurt them.
Once the arches have been removed and other stabilisation work has been done, Keith Patterson says the cathedral should be safe enough for people to go inside for the first time since the earthquake in 2011.
Our target is to have someone in there very soon after we've reached this stabilisation target of 34% of a new building standard. And so that will be around about November, December this year, which will be an exciting time.
The Christchurch Cathedral rebuild has a budget of $154 million. That could rise by a further $4.6 million because of inflation. Mr. Patterson says consultants are working on a revised estimate as the cost of steel and wages escalates.
It's very similar to what it was before, but maybe there'll be a 2 to 3% increase, something like that. So it's not like it's suddenly an unmanageable situation.
Restorers are still seeking about $50 million in donations to cover a funding shortfall. The project is due to be completed in 2027.
Not too many kind words from you all regarding businesses struggling in Auckland's CBD. Chris says, I go into Auckland City weekly. I don't hold a lot of hope for any recovery at all, sadly. Empty shops everywhere, and it just looks grubby at best. And someone else says, sorry to hear that CBD retailers and hospitality, but this is the new normal. Less workers in the CBD. You need to relocate or retrain.
RNZ News at 6. Good evening, kia ora tātou, ko Evie Ashton tēnei. New Zealand filmmaker Dame Jane Campion has won the Best Director Award for her Gothic Western, The Power of the Dog, at the Oscars, though it missed out on Best Film. She's just the third woman in 9 decades to win Best Director. The Prime Minister, Jacinda Ardern, is praising Dame Jane.
Can I congratulate Dame Jane Campion on her win and thank her for once again putting New Zealand on the world stage, displaying just how beautiful our country is with her talent, her skills and her storytelling. It's a phenomenal outcome and I know we're all very proud of her.
Best Picture went to the heartwarming comedy drama Coda, while Jessica Chastain won the Best Actress Oscar for her role in the drama The Eyes of Tammy Faye. However, the awards were overshadowed by a violent exchange when Best Actor winner Will Smith took offence at a joke and slapped comedian Chris Rock. The head of the Film Commission says Dame Jane Campion's Oscar success is a win for the whole country. Chief Executive David Strong told Checkpoint the government's $8 million investment into the film, combined with Netflix's investment, saw about $28 million pumped into the New Zealand economy.
About 60% of that money went directly to service industries, accommodation, rentals, building, construction, electrics, etc. And we understand that because the film was made over the first sort of COVID period, it actually saved a number of service industries. So I think it's a big win for the country.
David Strong says the film's many awards reflect the talent and skills and locations New Zealand can offer the film industry. New Zealand is sending 9 Defence Force staff to Europe to help Ukraine defend itself against Russia's invasion. 7 intelligence analysts and 1 officer will go to the United Kingdom. 1 other officer will be based in Belgium. Cabinet has also approved the use of the Defence Force's open source intelligence capabilities for 3 months. The Prime Minister, Jacinda Ardern, says the contribution will directly help the Ukrainian army. The government is also shipping communications equipment to Ukraine, along with the helmets and body armour announced last week. President Volodymyr Zelensky says Ukraine is prepared to discuss adopting a neutral status as part of a potential peace deal. His comments came in an interview with independent Russian journalists. The BBC's Grant Ferret has more.
According to the media regulator Roskomnadzor, two of the media organisations involved in the interview had previously been designated foreign agents. The liberal Russian-language news outlet Meduza, which is based in Latvia, said it had interviewed the Ukrainian president along with the Russian newspaper Kommersant and the Russian TV station Dozhd. In the 90-minute interview, Mr. Zelensky said Ukraine was prepared to discuss neutral status as part of a peace deal, but that it would have to be guaranteed by third parties and put to a referendum.
The Defence Minister says a draft security agreement between Solomon Islands and China was not on his intelligence radar. Australia and New Zealand have expressed serious concerns over the deal that would potentially allow Beijing to station military forces in the Solomons. Pene Henare has just returned from a trip to Fiji, where New Zealand committed to strengthening defence ties and maritime security. He says New Zealand has a strong role to play in the Pacific, but the draft deal is a surprise.
The fact that there is an agreement looking to be shaped between these two governments is certainly concerning for me, and the next step hasn't come through in the intelligence that I'm being briefed on.
The Prime Minister says the agreement and New Zealand's concerns will be raised with China through diplomatic channels. Waka Kotahi has ruled out putting up a temporary bridge across State Highway 35's Mangahauini River. Tokomaru Bay residents have been wading or riding on horseback to cross the river since a large chunk of the bridge was washed away during floods last week. Waka Kotahi spokesperson Jacqueline Hankin told Checkpoint constructing a temporary or Bailey bridge would take roughly the same amount of time as repairing it. Ms Hankin says a Bailey bridge in this case would also only be suitable for light vehicles. She says crews are working dawn till dusk 7 days a week and hope to have the bridge open by April the 13th. And COVID-19 is having a devastating impact on central Auckland retailers. At least 34 shops are empty on Queen Street's Golden Mile, and foot traffic is less than half of what it was before 2019. This retailer, who wants to remain anonymous, is closing down her store next month.
Financially, I'm drained, and even though borders are opened, I don't think we can actually play the waiting game. It could be months, but it could be years before the city turns around again.
Business organisation Heart of the City says foot traffic is down 65% compared to before the pandemic. There are 12,882 new community cases of COVID and 11 new deaths from COVID reported today. That's the news.
Tonight on Nights, Helene Elliott talks sport back home in Los Angeles after her trip to the Beijing Winter Olympics. Brad Warrington, aka DJ Sticky Fingers, presents another chapter in his story of Kiwi hip-hop. And the Otago University physicist Dr. Jonathan Squire, who may have helped solve one of astronomy's greatest puzzles. Why is the sun's atmosphere hotter than its surface? On Nights of me, Brian Crump, after the news at 7 on RNZ National.
And we're funded through New Zealand On Air. You're back with Lisa Owen on Checkpoint next. First, the short forecast from Met Service to midnight Tuesday. From Northland to northern Taranaki, also Taumaranui, Taupo and Bay of Plenty. Mainly fine. Isolated showers in Bay of Plenty and Coromandel during the afternoons and evenings, and possibly for Northland and Auckland tomorrow. For Gisborne and Hawke's Bay, rain with isolated heavy falls in Gisborne and the Wairoa district until tomorrow. Taihape and Wairarapa, cloudy periods with a few showers. From southern Taranaki to Wellington, fine and cloudy periods. A few showers are possible in Wellington. Fine weather for Nelson. From Bulla to Fiordland, cloudy periods. A few showers are developing about the fjords by the evening and possibly further north tomorrow morning. From Marlborough to Southland, fine apart from some cloudy areas near the coast. Cloud is becoming widespread tonight with patchy drizzle developing, mainly about coastal Marlborough, Otago and Southland. And for Te Kohu, the Chatham Islands, Low cloud with drizzle at times. It's 7 minutes past 6. We'll be back with news headlines for you at 6:30.
Nā mihi iwi no mai hoki mai. This is Checkpoint, ko Lisa Owen tēnei. While Dame Jane Campion won Best Director at the Oscars, the awards were overshadowed by Best Actor winner Will Smith striking comedian Chris Rock on stage after he made a joke about Smith's wife, Jada Pinkett Smith. It's undoubtedly one of the most shocking moments in live television history. World Watch's Max Toll has more.
The joke was bad taste, to say the least, seemingly poking fun at Jada Pinkett Smith's battle with alopecia. Presenter Chris Rock moved on, but Will Smith marched on stage and slapped the comedian.
I'm out here. Uh-oh, Richard. Oh, wow. Wow. Will Smith just smacked the shit out of me.
Chris Rock was left stunned. Smith returned to his seat before swearing at the comedian.
Wow, dude.
Yes.
It was a G.I. Jane joke.
Keep my wife's name out your mouth.
I'm going to, okay? Okay. That was a greatest night in the history of television. Okay.
Images from LA showed actors Bradley Cooper and Denzel Washington calming Will Smith down, who then went on to collect Best Actor for King Richard.
I want to apologize to the Academy. I want to apologize to all my fellow nominees. This is a beautiful moment, and I'm not crying for winning an award. It's not about winning an award for me.
The other headline at the 94th Academy Awards was Kiwi Dame Jane Campion taking home Best Director for The Power of the Dog.
Kia ora, Aotearoa, New Zealand and Australia. I love directing because it's a deep dive into story, yet the task of manifesting a world can be overwhelming. The sweet thing is, I'm not alone.
With Chloe Zhao's win last year, women have now won the Best Director award 2 years in a row. At the Beehive, the Prime Minister was quick to congratulate Dame Jane.
Can I congratulate Dame Jane Campion on her win and thank her for once again putting New Zealand on the world stage, displaying just how beautiful our country is with her talent, her skills and her storytelling. It's a phenomenal outcome and I know we're all very proud of her.
As for the other major categories, the heartwarming comedy drama Coda, about a child of deaf parents, took home Best Picture, while Jessica Chastain won Best Actress for The Eyes of Tammy Faye. After 3 years without a host, comedians Regina Hall, Wanda Sykes and Amy Schumer restored an Oscar tradition.
I don't want any of you all to worry. You know, it's going to be a typical quick COVID test. You'll come backstage, take your mask off if you have one, and your clothes, and then I'm going to swab. No, it's simple. I'm going to swab the back of your mouth with my tongue, and
this is the highest honor for a comedian. It is such a dream come true to perform for all of you tonight, so thank you for having me. My plan is to stay present as hell until I black out. And now...
Best Supporting Actress went to Ariana DeBose for West Side Story.
Imagine this little girl in the back seat of a white Ford Focus. Look into her eyes. You see a queer, openly queer woman of color, an Afro-Latina, who found her strength in life through art. And that's what I believe we're here to celebrate.
Troy Kotsur won Best Supporting Actor for Coda. Kenneth Branagh took home Original Screenplay for Belfast, while Jane Campion lost out on Best Adapted Screenplay to Sian Heder for Coda. There was plenty of music.
We don't talk about Bruno.
But only a sprinkling of politics.
And one last thing. President Biden, bring Brittany Griner home.
A phone number appeared on the big screen during the ceremony asking for financial contributions to support the people of Ukraine.
And Chris Rock has declined to file a police report over the incident with Will Smith. The LA Police Department says it's aware of an incident between two individuals during the Academy Awards program. It'd be hard not to be aware of it. It says the incident involved one individual slapping another. The individual involved has declined to file a police report. If the involved party desires a police report at a later date, LAPD will be available to complete an investigative report. On to other things now, and the New Zealand extreme skier Jess Hodder has smoked the competition, taking out the Free Ride World Tour title in Switzerland at the weekend. If you're not familiar, it is the kind of skiing where competitors launch themselves down vertigo-inducing mountains, booby-trapped with exposed rocks and drops, and they go at breakneck speeds. Hodder from Oawakuni came an absolute gutser in the last stage of the tour, but was so far ahead on points. She is top of the mountain, and Jess joins us now. Hi Jess, where are you for starters?
Hi, I'm just in the lobby at the hotel at the moment.
Still in Switzerland?
Yeah, going to be here for a few more days.
So what's it like? Top of the world, top of the mountain?
Top of the mountain, scary as hell. Top of the world at the moment. There's no words. I'm super, super happy, super stoked.
What does it mean to you? Because it's hard graft to get there, and I know you've struggled financially and you've done the hard yards. So what does it mean?
Man, I have no words, honestly. I feel like it's been a pretty long journey, and if I sit there and think back at all of the hard work that it took to get here, it's a pretty long journey and a pretty amazing journey. But I've met so many amazing people and had so many amazing experiences along the way, so it's all worth it. It's all worth it.
Okay, so for people who may not be as familiar with your sport, the final competition, right? You took one hell of a tumble. Can you just describe it? Can you describe it? What kind of speed were you going at? What happened?
As far as speed, I'm actually not sure how fast I was going, but I skied into, there's a mandatory air in the line that I had, which just basically means there is a drop that you have to do to get out of the zone that I was in. So I was doing some turns above it. It was quite heavy snow and quite hard to keep my skis on top of the snow. And as I took off for the actual drop, I caught a rock on the takeoff and fell. I pitched forward and couldn't hang on. I couldn't stay on my feet, and I essentially just tumbled down the mountain after that. Luckily, there wasn't too much exposure below me, so I was okay.
Yeah, it's been described as tomahawking, and while you've been talking to me, that footage has been playing, and you just you're like a tumbleweed over and over and over again. I mean, wow, how could you not be hurt?
I honestly am thanking my lucky stars. I've had 3 quite big accidents in competition this season. It seems like it's been make or break. It's either been I've done really well or I've crashed spectacularly. So I'm just feeling super lucky to be able to walk out of that and be able to go on with the rest of the season.
What is the backpack? Explain that to us. You've got a backpack on your back while you're in competition.
Yeah, so the backpack has avalanche equipment in it. So we have a shovel, a probe, and an airbag. So the backpack actually has a mechanism in it that blows up into like a big balloon, so that if there is an avalanche, it puts you in a better position to hopefully coming out on top of it, so you're not buried.
I mean, what does that tell people about the nature of your sport?
That it can be a little bit sketchy. Yeah, it's definitely an important piece of equipment, and I hope I never actually have to pull the cord and use it. But there has been accidents in the past. We do have people that are working on the face and doing avalanche control, but sometimes mistakes do happen, and you don't get every little bit. So yeah, it's good to have that equipment, but it's also really good for protection because it actually saved my back this year. It saved me from going to hospital.
What now for you? You've reached this absolute pinnacle. So what's your next dream?
The next dream? Well, I do want to keep competing on the Free Ride World Tour. It's such an amazing community, and I really, really love being a part of it. But I'm hoping to work more towards a little bit more filming jobs with skiing, and hopefully finding a way to get more people involved in skiing and making it more accessible for others.
congratulations. It's an amazing achievement.
Thank you so much.
Lovely to talk to you and all the best. That is Jess Hotter, who's speaking to us there from Switzerland, where she has won that free ride World Tour Championship. And man, check out the vision online if you haven't seen it of the tumble she took in that last stage of the tour. But she had such high points, she still came out on top. It is 17 minutes past 6 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. A heavy rain watch remains in place for the North Island's east coast as the Sodden district recovers from last week's flooding. It will be a slow build back to normality, but it's one resilient residents are well prepared for. Jimmy Allingham reports.
Tired Tairāwhiti residents haven't yet said goodbye to leaden skies, sodden ground and disruption. And as the rain continues to fall, risks of further damage remain, says Tokomaru Bay Fire Brigade Officer in Charge Andrew Shelton.
We've had a lot of rain falling in the last 3 to 4 days, and even though the intensity has reduced, the potential for things like landslides is still a high risk for us in our region.
Andrew Shelton says the ground's saturated and can't take much more water. He says residents in the town, north of Gisborne, have been well prepared for a disaster and have enough supplies so they don't need to travel.
We've definitely not had the number of call-outs that we were probably expecting, and that just shows the resilience of the communities around the place. They've got their own networks and in place to be self-sufficient, and they're leaving emergency services for those critical emergencies.
Further north in Tokomaru Bay, Hapu representative Lillian Ward says locals can only support each other but not clean up while the rain continues. The Mangahauini Bridge across State Highway 33 in the town has been washed out by floodwaters. Jacqueline Hankin of Waka Kotahi New Zealand Transport Agency says repair work is well underway.
We have started progressing the repair on that bridge. We've had, I think in the first 24 hours, we had over 1,000 tonne of rock placed to repair that bridge. So our crews up there are doing a huge amount of work to get that bridge up and running and repaired and to be able to connect those communities again.
The rock diverts water from the bridge so workers can repair it. Jacqueline Hankin says the bridge is expected to reopen on April the 13th.
Our crews are working at a heck of a pace and they are working double shift to get that open as soon as possible and make sure they do it as safely as possible.
Jacqueline Hankin says a portable Bailey Bridge was considered but wasn't appropriate as a temporary fix. A small section of State Highway 35 between Tokomaru Bay and Tapuia Springs remains closed after the road was washed out by a flooded river. Meanwhile, insurance claims are being lodged across the region. Insurance Council Chief Executive Tim Grafton says there's plenty of insurance cover available, including for people in flood-prone areas.
What we do need to do, though, with respect to communities that have been hit several times over the last 2 to 3 years from extreme weather events, is recognise how we need to reduce the risks to those properties.
Tim Grafton says reducing risk could involve putting regulation in place to restrict building in some places and looking at ways to protect existing communities. A heavy rain watch remains in place for the region. Met Service meteorologist Lewis Ferris says falls are likely to be far less severe than last week.
We saw in the downpours early last week 50 millimetres of rain accumulating in a single hour. So we're talking about different intensities, but also talking about a different environment. It's very saturated now. So even with the smaller accumulations of rain, impacts could still happen quite quickly.
Rain is forecast to continue until the end of the week when dry spells are expected. Tairāwhiti Civil Defence Group Controller David Wilson says all but a few of the people evacuated are back in their homes. About 15 homes have been assessed for damage and 2 dangerous building notices issued, although that figure is expected to rise.
Let's get to more of your feedback now on the shine going off the Golden Mile of Auckland with COVID. A lot of businesses have closed up shop. Maureen says, don't hospitality owners get it? Most people don't want to get sick. Be creative, think outside the square to keep your business going. And another person's got in touch to say, as an office worker, I never, ever want to go back to the CBD. Even before COVID, it was a place of violence, drug deals, beggars and vagrants. It never felt like a place where one could totally relax without the overlaying feeling of a dirty old town. But this from Richard. By golly, some of your whānau are so nasty. People face losing flooded homes, others losing everything invested in their job-providing businesses. But listeners are so sanctimonious. Kia ora rā e hoa. Thanks for getting in touch. Text us on 2101. The leader of the opposition in Solomon Islands claims he warned Australian officials last year that China was pushing for a military pact with the strategically located Pacific nation. News of the draft agreement is causing growing concern in the region, and one analyst warns Beijing could soon also gain a foothold in Papua New Guinea. The ABC's Andrew Green reports.
On Honiara's main thoroughfare, the newly built Chinese embassy stands out from other buildings in the capital. It was opened in 2020, a year after this strategically located Pacific nation switched diplomatic allegiances from Taipei to Beijing. Now, news that there's a draft security agreement between Solomon Islands and China is making some residents uneasy.
Me, a little bit worried.
I'm a bit worried because people are talking about this, and I understand that China is a communist country.
My worry is that it will create a clash with countries we already have security ties with before.
In November, Australia deployed troops and police to Honiara to help quell days of anti-government riots. But DFAT officials were alarmed when an offer of law enforcement help from China was also accepted. Solomon Islands opposition leader Matthew Whale has told the ABC he tried to warn Australia last year that China was pushing for a broader security deal.
I have intimated as much to the Australian High Commissioner and officials that this was in the offing, even as far back as last year. All the indications were there. The Australian government did nothing about it. So I'm extremely disappointed in the Australian government.
Now he wants Australia to strengthen its existing bilateral security agreement with Solomon Islands.
We've benefited from that treaty with Australia. What does that treaty not able to give us? Maybe that should be a subject of discussions with Australia and New Zealand as opposed to going into a new treaty altogether with China.
A federal government spokesperson tells the ABC Australian officials regularly engage with Solomon Island stakeholders on issues of interest to Australia and our region, adding, "We continue to engage in an open and transparent manner at all levels with the Solomon Islands government on its security arrangements." Liberal MP Warren Inch is a close watcher of Solomon Islands politics. His far north Queensland electorate of Leichhardt sits less than 2,000 kilometres away.
There's a lot of things that are happening there that we continue to work with them. This has sort of come out of the blue. I am frequently seeing Chinese announcements, but at the end of the day, I've yet to see anything come to fruition.
Clinton Fernandez, a professor of international politics at the University of New South Wales, isn't so sure. He believes China will finalise the security deal with Solomon Islands and warns Beijing is also making inroads in Papua New Guinea.
The next item on the agenda is the Daru Island area of Papua New Guinea, which is going to have a Chinese presence. And before too long, a pro-China party will win the national elections in Papua New Guinea.
The mornings are getting chilly and the end of daylight saving is just around the corner. And as winter approaches, there's concern the colder months will drive COVID cases higher and compound disruptions in homes, schools and workplaces. While in New Zealand, the Ministry of Health is considering rolling out a fourth vaccine dose to vulnerable Kiwis, in Australia, experts are pressing the need for a fourth jab across the entire population. The ABC's Matt Banford reports.
After a tumultuous few years, most people are trying to put the pandemic behind them, but businesses are still feeling fragile. Dominique Lamb is from the National Retailers Association.
Coming into winter, there's certainly a sense of, I think, dread as to what that's going to mean. Because, I mean, at the end of the day, they still have all of the same costs happening, whether it's, leasing and tenancy, whether it's stock, or amongst other things, right, that they have to make sure that they continue to earn. And, of course, with colder weather coming, the chance or likelihood of a new variant coming, I mean, there's definitely nervousness within the industry.
With double vaccination rates above 95% and restrictions easing around the country, it's easy to forget how disruptive COVID can be. But Dominique Lamb says her members remain on edge.
Often these businesses may have only a business owner or 1 to 2 staff with them if they're a micro business, and if someone in their family contracts COVID, it means their entire business and income simply stops.
Schools are also struggling. The Australian Education Union's Karina Haythorpe says rising infections are leading some to close.
The situation's quite bad right across the country. There's an overwhelming sense of exhaustion. It's been an incredibly challenging start to the year, very disrupted in terms of learning, of course, with many outbreaks, and we're now seeing the direct result of increased COVID infections, which is that schools are unfortunately having to close for periods of time.
Tens of thousands of Australians are still being diagnosed with COVID every day, and with the winter flu season coming, there's calls to offer the general population a 4th vaccine. Currently, only those aged over 65 or in a vulnerable category can access it. Professor Nathan Bartlett is the head of viral immunology and respiratory disease at the University of Newcastle.
As we roll towards winter and the time between the third booster increases, we know that people's vulnerability to more severe disease as a result of COVID-19 is going to increase. And so I think people should be given the option to top that up again.
He says it's a smart way of easing the pressure over winter.
I mean, we're already seeing significant disruptions across essentially every facet of society as a result of people being laid up ill with the infection or as a result of being in close contact. Now, I know close contact rules will probably be relaxed moving forward, but it still doesn't reduce the burden of the actual disease itself.
Lieutenant General John Fruin is leading the nation's vaccine task force and says the next few months are crucial to getting vulnerable people protected.
This winter dose is really about protecting our most vulnerable and making sure that those who are over 65 or Indigenous people over 50 or people with immunocompromised situations, they need to come forward and get this dose.
But he doesn't think a 4th jab is necessary for everyone yet.
What Otago are telling us is that isn't what the science is showing them. Again, the winter dose, the 4th dose is important for those really vulnerable. What's really important for the general population is the booster, that 3rd shot.
While she doesn't support mandatory vaccination, Dominique Lamb says more people should be given the option of getting a 4th jab.
We've always held the view that retail workers are frontline workers. So if it was open to other categories, absolutely we would support it. And, we would absolutely welcome it.
And the final word on Auckland's struggling CBD goes to Meg. She says kill 2 birds with 1 stone, turn the redundant offices into housing. It'll stimulate the cafes as well as providing shelter, she says. That's all we've got time for. The Lote News team will keep you updated throughout the night. If you missed anything from the program, check us out on Spotify, Apple or wherever you get your podcasts. Ko te kaupapa tuatahi a pōpō, and tomorrow from 5 a.m. First, there was a shortage of jib and building materials. First Up looks at whether the next crisis could be losing builders themselves to overseas. Ko hoki mai anō mātou a pōpō. Catch you tomorrow. Have a great night.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. Kia ora tātou, I'm Evie Ashton. The head of the New Zealand Film Commission is describing Jane Campion's Best Director Oscar as a win for the whole country. The Transport Agency says it's impractical to install a Bailey Bridge at Tokomaru Bay, which is cut off by the flood-damaged Mangahauini Bridge. 5 of the 9 New Zealand Defence Force staff being sent to Europe will be specifically involved in analysing satellite imagery from Russia's invasion of Ukraine. And nearly 20,000 people have signed a petition to save Christchurch's St George's Maternity Centre. Those are the headlines. Our next news and weather is at 7 o'clock.
The original plan was obviously to walk in, much as they did in Crimea, with limited fighting, limited casualties, and to be welcomed by the population. Now, that was never going to happen in the rest of Ukraine. And I think once they realised that, and once their armed forces started doing so very badly on the ground, then they switched to this other approach, which is just flattening cities and terrorise the population into giving up.
Up to date if you're up late. Lately with Karen Hay every weeknight from 10 on RNZ National.
Looking forward to it, Karen, and I'm Brian Crump, who's also up late, reasonably late anyway,
for Nights, which commences after the news at 7 this evening. My first guest is Otago University physicist Dr. Jonathan Squire, and he has been tackling, a lot of scientists have been tackling this one, and that is, why is the surface of the sun not as hot as its atmosphere? I mean, given that all the energy is coming from inside the sun where all that fusion business is going on, you would think that the closer you are to the action, the more hotter you would be. So why is it that the atmosphere is hotter?